Shalom, this is Nizama Shalhamada Bar Yasharal on my channel Nizama the Hebrew Mystic Healer. Before I get started, I'd like to go ahead and, as always, show a little love to my 3D kin, the 12 tribes of Israel scattered to the four corners of this 3D Earth realm matrix. Much love and shalom to you. And I'd also like to show some love to my cosmic kin, scattered to the 12 dimensions of this universal egg matrix. Much love and shalom to you as well. And as always, show a little love and support to my viewers, especially those of you who are subscribed. If you're not yet subscribed to my channel, please do so now, and don't forget to hit the notification bell. So today I want to talk about a topic that I feel isn't really discussed, especially within a lot of the so-called spiritual communities, and that is the importance of basically embracing our culture, embracing our ancestry at a 3D level and by extension at a cosmic level. And the reason this is important is for the same reason that I'm always talking about claiming our sovereignty, and that I'm always talking about climbing the spiral of our DNA, or activating our DNA, or basically activating and awakening and recalling our cosmic ancestry, our tree of life, which is the way back to source and is the way out of samsara. A good example of this is, Siddhartha Gautama, Buddha, who recalled every single one of his past lives. And, that's really what we're here to do. We're here to remember. Because ever since the fall of Atlantis, our memories have been wiped in between incarnations every time we come here. And that's not how it's supposed to be. In fact, as I've mentioned in other videos, the third dimension of Earth didn't even exist until that particular hijacking occurred. So why is it important for us to embrace our culture? Our culture is connected to DNA. That's the difference between culture and religion. You see, religion, and please don't misunderstand me, because even the New Age belief systems are a form of religion. Even Starseed doctrine or channelings is a form of religion. A religion is any kind of agreed upon belief system that has to do with spirituality and any effect. Now, why is this different than culture? Culture and memory recall is personal to each person, and it's connected to our DNA. It's connected to our ancestry. Religion, by contrast, is actually designed to disconnect us from our ancestry, to disconnect us from our culture. Religion has been used for thousands and thousands of years to do just that. And why was it used as a tool to do that? Because when we're connected to our roots, we're connected to our trunk, we're connected to our branches. When we know who we are in 3D, we can then understand who we are multidimensionally and cosmically. This is because who we are in 3D is just a lower expression of that. So each one of us incarnates here. We have a unique blueprint, a unique cosmic tree, and we will incarnate through our own ancestry. So not only are we our own ancestors, but we incarnate through our ancestral line specifically. Now, there are some of us who incarnate in mixed avatars. I myself am actually mixed, and in many incarnations I have been mixed between a Hebrew Israelite bloodline and another racial bloodline. But I always incarnate along that basic paternal DNA. Now, I may incarnate through certain extended family, but I'm still going to follow that basic DNA. And all aspects of the DNA all connect to me. And this can also, expand into cosmic celestial origins, where we can be literally polykin in the sense where we incarnate in all these different constellations, but it follows a migration pattern. It follows ancestry. Same thing with 3D on Earth. An avatar cannot be compatible unless the person's blueprint is somewhat compatible. So what this means is, for example, when we're here in these 3D avatars, our cosmic blueprint has to be somewhat accommodated within it. Now, not 100%, and that's why a lot of us will have physical issues. That's why we don't have the full capabilities, the entire activation of who we are as spiritual beings while we're in these avatars. But they are somewhat compatible in order for us to actually operate them. It's almost like a video game. Think of the movie Avatar. Look at that movie. That is a perfect example. In fact, there's so much symbolism. We'll have to do a video on that one of these days. But that is a perfect example. They had to use half of his human DNA and half of this avatar DNA to even get it to work, to even get it to be compatible for his soul or his consciousness. So it's the same thing with these physical avatar bodies. So our physical avatar bodies and our physical lineage are just as important as our cosmic lineage, and they're intimately tied together. So dealing with ancestors, embracing our ancestral culture, not just in 3D, but cosmically, and recalling all of that is huge and part of our awakening process. Because the first step to spiritual awakening, to spiritual gnosis, is to know thyself. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to like and agree with everything that our ancestors have done. This doesn't mean we have to like and agree with everything we've done in past lives. This can also mean that for those of us who have more DNA mixing in our lineage, there may be parts of our DNA which are actually blood feuding against each other. This can actually cause trauma, it could cause war within our very cosmic makeup. And when this happens, it's very important to do shadow work. This is the importance of shadow work integration. Shadow work is huge in spirituality because it allows us to deal with the trauma, to heal, to integrate, to face all parts of ourselves and accept all parts of ourselves. And in doing so, the parts of ourselves which might be quote unquote negative doesn't, have power over us. We actually give our shadow power when we try to fight against it. The key is to embrace it as part of ourselves. Well, the same thing comes with our ancestry. Some of us may have incest in our ancestry, murder, rape, genocide, war, poverty, racism, various forms of oppression, bigotry, adultery, all different types of sexuality, bestiality, homosexuality, all different types of things and preferences and expressions, character traits, temperaments, belief systems. That's huge. What happens when within our belief system, we have certain incarnations or certain ancestors that are witches, and we have other ancestors that are Protestant Christian, for example. What happens if we have ancestors that are, so-called Hebrew Israelite or so-called, Negro, right? Or Native or Indigenous. And then we also have ancestors that are conquistadors or ancestors that are slave masters. What happens there? Do we neglect those parts of our bloodline because we don't agree with them? No, because they're all our ancestry. The solution isn't to ostracize parts of ourselves. So this all goes back into DNA activation. We activate all of our DNA. We integrate all of our DNA. That's when healing takes place. If obviating trauma and obviating atrocities healed, then we wouldn't have the racial schisms and issues that we have in the United States. We can't just obviate and pretend things don't happen. That's not the way to heal. The way to heal is to face it head on, to deal with it, and to integrate it. And recompense. I've done ancestral work shamanically where, certain ancestors, had to acknowledge things they did and make amends in a sense, in a way within that ancestral realm. And other times where they just needed to hear, that they were forgiven or that they were loved. Or sometimes they just needed to confess things that had to do with why I myself was having a physical ailment, for example, or a problem or an issue or a repeated pattern that was due to a familial curse, or which is what happens when trauma happens or an atrocity is done by an ancestor and that's not corrected. It can create a continual loop which becomes a generational curse. Sorry about that, guys. It's a weird ad popping up on my other phone. I was trying to play some nice music in the background, and now it's not letting me switch the ad off. There we go. Okay. Being in Egypt, you get some strange ads. Anyway, the general idea of this video is for us to understand that remembering our past lives, activating our cosmic trees, embracing our ancestry, healing ancestral schisms, doing shadow work, working through trauma, integration, soul fragment retrieval. Sometimes we suffer such a traumatic experience in our past lives or in our ancestry or even in our current life. I know for me it's been all three, that it actually creates a fracture in our soul, and sometimes those fractures will break off, and we have to actually reintegrate that. We have to retrieve that. So all of this has to do with the awakening path. It's not just this fluffy thing of, oh, I'm this and I'm that, and I, was told that I was a starseed, or I was in this incarnation, this dimension. Yes, that's part of it. But what are you doing with the information? Are you using it to heap onto your ego? Or are you taking that information and are you applying it to your awakening process and activating more memories, traveling your DNA? When I do shamanic journeying to look into past lives, I don't look for fluff. I look for what's the shadow I need to work through. That's what we need to be doing. We need to be looking for the areas of our incarnations that need healing, that need repair, that need integration. We want to remember all of it. I'm not saying only focus on the shadow or only focus on the areas of our ancestry that need healing, but we need to really primarily focus on those areas. And once we focus on those areas, then we can expand out further. Because a lot of times when we don't work on those traumas, the shadow's so dark that we can't even concentrate on anything else, and it colors our entire perception. So going back to culture, what happens when we have different cultures within our DNA that seem to feud against each other? Well, for me, let me just use myself as an example, because I have an admixture in my bloodline. I go with the patrilineal culture of the Hebrew Nibiru Anunnaki culture, because that's what I choose to do. That's what I feel called. That is the aspect of my DNA that goes all the way back to my primordial origin. So that's what I choose to gravitate toward. Now, I do integrate and pull from eclectically other aspects of my ancestry that maybe aren't echoed entirely within like the Hebraic culture, but they were still Hebraic lineage. For example, there's shamanistic practices I integrate and things like that are still within the Hebraic bloodline, but they may not be just exclusively through that particular Hebraic culture that people think about when they think about, for example, the Hebrew Israelites in the Bible. Because a lot has been left out, a lot has been rewritten. The oppressors have had their hands on our texts. The Masoretes had their hands on our texts, the scribes, the dark priesthood. So a lot has transpired. So I look at things more holistically. I 100% embrace my ancestry, both in 3D and cosmically, and my culture. But I also consider myself a sovereign being. So I claim my sovereignty. I'm a slave to no one. I serve no one. I simply am an expression I simply am this, if that makes sense. That's where the whole I am that I am concept comes from. My Godhead, my spiritual origin point is connected to this. So that's how I would explain it. So I don't follow a religion. I embrace my culture. I follow, my ancestors' national laws. But I am not a servant to any being, if that makes sense. But I embrace my culture in that sense that I acknowledge that this is my ancestry. Now, do I neglect other parts of my ancestry? Absolutely not. But that's just the one that I personally gravitate toward. There are other aspects of my ancestry that I gravitate toward. They just don't feature as prominently, but they're there, and I love them and I appreciate them. And when I do ancestral work, I don't leave any ancestor out. All ancestors are equal and welcome. And I heal and work with all those within my ancestry. So I was just giving myself an example there. We all come from different bloodlines. We all come from different cosmic trees. But this whole idea of us being one and this fluffy stuff. Now, are we all one in the sense where we all come from one consciousness at some point? Well, yes, but we're still all individual soul expressions, and that consciousness is having experience through us. In order to go back, technically, if that's what you want, we have to go back to the source. The only way back to the source is back up through that tree. And the whole point is that we are all very different. So we can't be one in that sense. And so really, it's not about us just devolving into this, mindless blob. That's not what spiritual, awakening is. That's not what spiritual growth is. It's about becoming our own sovereign being with our own rich history and our own rich culture, and being able to learn how to create our own reality with strength and humility and temperance and compassion and authenticity and beauty and realness and rawness. Being able to just be who we are, the best versions of ourselves as sovereign expressions. So we can't obviate anything about ourselves. We have to, all this has to be integrated in. All this has to be embraced. All this has to be accepted. Religion is there to separate us from our roots, separate us from our trees. Culture is part of us. Culture is us. Embrace that. That's why I always say I don't follow a religion. I don't follow the quote-unquote Hebrew Israelite movement. And I know a lot of Hebrew Israelites, Miss Susan, as an example, would probably say I was a witch. Or, a lot of them don't even think I'm Hebrew. They'll say, I'm Mongolian because of, my Native American background. Because of my Aztec background, like, they just throw these names out. Some of them think I'm Caucasian, I have an admixture in my DNA, but the point is I get all sorts of labels and stuff put on me. People think I'm off or, because I don't follow a paradigm. I follow my own truth that I found within my own Godhead, my own divinity, my own soul group, my own soul council. I embrace my culture. I embrace my ancestry. I understand that my ancestry is unique. Everyone's ancestry is unique. We all go back to a certain soul group. We all go back to a certain bloodline point origin. But we have to be authentically ourselves. This means embracing our ancestry, and it means embracing who we are. It's the same continuum. As above, so below, as within, so without. So I just wanted to do a quick video on that. It's kind of just me having the thought and thinking, hey, this is important to bring up. Maybe some people will find this to be refreshing. Maybe this will help some people distinguish there and kind of understand what I mean when I'm talking about awakening, remembering, and traveling our DNA and our cosmic tree. So with that, I'll go ahead and say take care. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Shalom, and stay tuned for more videos.